Good Hallows Eve, boys and ghouls. We once again find ourselves in the most bone-chilling time of year, Halloween. A time for frights, scares, synonyms, anything that sends a chill down your spine. As always, my name is Idiot Ben, and I will be your host into this excursion into the depths of hell. We have a certified pants shitter for... No, don't... maybe not. We have a certified woo-woo for you this year. I'm going to be talking about scary video games. What do you say that we hop right in? I mean, it's not actually on a VHS tape. You know, everything's digital these days. I don't even have a VCR, so... Folks, it's happening. It's finally here. It's Halloween. Well, I mean, it's pretty close. I know this isn't exactly a hot take, so to speak, but Halloween is easily my favorite holiday. Christmas, pretty cool. You know, I get some free video games, but it's stressful when you're an adult. Thanksgiving is good, free food and all. Easter, like, who fucking cares? Even as a kid, I didn't give a shit. But Halloween is fun no matter who you are, how old you are, what you believe in. Halloween can be fun for all. It doesn't need to interfere with your religious beliefs. Just dress up as Muhammad. Actually, don't do that. What I'm trying to say is Halloween is a good time for all ages. I would almost argue that it's more fun for adults because you can dress up as a penis and just go buy yourself candy if you really want to. But in my opinion, the most fun part about Halloween is the build-up, which for me involves watching a ton of scary movies and, of course, playing lots of spooky video games. Horror is without a doubt my favorite genre, and that definitely applies to video games. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, The Evil Within, Dead Space, Layers of Fear, The Last of Us, Doki Doki Literature Club. Need I go on? I think what makes a horror video game so much more compelling than any other type of horror media is the interactivity of it all. Horror movies are fun, sure, but you can't help Kevin Bacon. You kinda just gotta cross your fingers and hope he makes it out okay. Spoiler, he doesn't. But with video games, you're there. You're doing it. That zombie is gonna kill Leon if you don't do something about it, and it's gonna be your fault. Do you want that on your conscience? Scary games are so much fun. The way that they put you in the driver's seat and they put it up to you to survive all the unspeakable horrors that come at you. But there's one horror franchise that really hinges on putting you in the driver's seat, and it's one of the most controversial video game series of all time. I am, of course, talking about Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's, or FNAF as I will not be calling it, has always intrigued me. At the very least, I think it's one of the most interesting video game series ever made. So in celebration of Jamie Lee Curtis's birthday, I'm coming at you with an ultimate Five Nights at Freddy's Halloween spookathon. That's right, I have gone completely insane and I am going to look at every single goddamn Five Nights at Freddy's game. And when I say every single one, I mean the main series of games, because I don't have a human lifespan's worth of time to talk about every single game. Also, I'm not going to include Help Wanted, because it's virtual reality, and I can't afford a headset. I'm sorry. Five Nights at Freddy's is an indie survival horror series created by Scott Cawthon. Cawthon, a self-proclaimed member of the Jesus Christ fanbase, spent many years trying and failing to find success as a game developer through the creation of several Christian games, such as Noah's Ark and Pilgrim's Progress. In 2013, Scott released Chipper & Sons Lumber Co., a family-friendly game about beavers who own a lumber company. Much like many of his pre-Freddy games, Chipper & Sons was a total financial failure and not really worth noting, although there is one thing that's important about it. As people on the internet tend to do, criticisms were thrown at Chipper & Sons, with some complaining about the gameplay, others about the visuals. But one criticism that really stuck with Scott Cawthon was the seemingly unanimous stance that the in-game models were creepy and resembled animatronics. Initially, Cawthon was so discouraged by this that he almost gave up game design entirely. However, in a last-ditch attempt to find success at something he had been doing for nearly 20 years at that point, he got the idea to channel those criticisms into an all-new project, something he had never made before, a horror game. Now, before I really jump in, I feel like I should probably address the elephant in the room. Or I suppose I should say the Freddy. Those of you who are long-term fans of me, for whatever reason, will know that I already made an episode about Five Nights at Freddy's, where I looked at the first 4 games. First off, that episode came out 2 years ago, which I think is long enough to justify revisiting a topic. And second, that was my 5th YouTube video ever, and not to toot my own horn, but I think I've gotten a lot better at this. So yeah, that's my reasoning. And if you're upset, then, I mean, you're probably not upset. You probably don't care. Five Nights at Freddy's was released for PC in August of 2014. The premise, in a nutshell, is as follows. You have been recently hired to provide overnight security at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a Chuck E. Cheese-style arcade and pizza restaurant. So, as is implied by the title of the game, you are tasked with spending 5 nights watching this place from 12 to 6 a.m. What could possibly go wrong? Well, at the beginning of the first night, you receive a call from some dude who presumably works for the company, a character unofficially dubbed Phone Guy. He informs you that every night, the animatronics seemingly gain sentience and leave the stage to roam around the premises. Now, you would probably think that that alone would be enough to make you bail, no matter how high your student loan debts are, but it gets worse. For whatever reason, the animatronics are designed so that if they see an animatronic endoskeleton without a costume, they will grab it and stuff it into one of the costumes. The issue is that they also perceive humans to be bare endoskeletons. Wait a minute, humans? Well, that's me! So yeah, if they find you, they will kill you via bear costume. Your only method of defense against the animatronics are security cameras, hallway lights, and sliding doors on either side of your office. Now you might think, why wouldn't I just keep both doors closed at night? Well, I'm glad you asked. The other main issue you have to combat in this game is power. Everything you do in this game uses power. The more things you have on the go, the faster your power drains. And unfortunately, this restaurant runs on a generator powered by 2 AA batteries, so you're basically guaranteed to run out of power by the end of the night. So without further ado, what do you say that we meet our cast of animatronics? I'm not getting any younger. First is, of course, Freddy Fazbear, the namesake of the restaurant and the leader of the gang. Freddy is, of course, a bear with a little top hat and a bow tie, and I like him. I think he's a fun-looking character. There are 3 other animatronics aside from Freddy, and Scott Cawthon will forever be on my shit list for the terrible names that he gave these characters. I refuse to believe that Scott genuinely decided to keep the names because they, quote, grew on him and stuck. Like, you just couldn't think of any better names, bro. Just stop lying. It's sad. Anyway, first up is Bonnie the Bunny, the guitarist of the band. I've always imagined Bonnie with a southern accent for some reason, but that's just me. Next, we got Chica, the manic pixie dream girl of the group. Or should I say, manic chixie dream girl. Chica's got a cupcake. I don't know, none of these characters are terribly interesting. Finally, you got the bad boy of the group, Foxy the Pirate, who hangs out in his own little section of the restaurant called Pirate's Cove, and again, like, he's a pirate. You couldn't have given him a pirate name? So now all that shit's out of the way, let's look at the gameplay for real, because it's actually pretty interesting in my opinion. As I said, the goal of each night is to survive from midnight until 6 a.m. As the night goes along, the animatronics will leave the stage and wander around the restaurant, slowly trying to make their way to your office. They get more aggressive and less likely to stay in one spot as the nights go along. Chica and Bonnie are the 2 animatronics you really have to keep a constant eye on. They walk around the office and routinely appear at your doors, necessitating you to check the lights and close your doors. The nice thing is, Bonnie only ever appears at your left door and Chica only ever appears at your right window, but the game doesn't tell you that, which I like because it makes the game scarier for a first-time player. Next is Foxy. He's quite a lot different than the others. Foxy doesn't move around the restaurant at all. He spends all of his time in Pirate's Cove, necessitating you to check on him regularly while juggling everything else. Unlike Bonnie and Chica, if Foxy makes it out of Pirate's Cove, he will make an all-out dash to your office and kill your ass unless you're quick enough to close the door before he gets there. And of course, we got good old Freddy Five Night. Unlike his pals, who just stare at you and make it abundantly clear that they're coming to stuff your bitch ass into a costume, Freddy is a lot sneakier, and he likes to hide in the shadows and f with you by laughing and stuff. Plus, he can sneak right into your office without appearing at either door. If you run out of power at the end of the night, Freddy appears at your left door, and if you're lucky, he won't kill you and you'll get to move on to the next night. In a nutshell, the other animatronics want to kill you, Freddy wants to torment you and then kill you. If you're interested in an in-depth explanation of how the animatronics work from a game design perspective, I would recommend Tech Rules' video about it. He goes into detail about how the game works and how each animatronic functions and stuff. It's a good watch. Five Nights at Freddy's, the first one, is actually a surprisingly in-depth game, and don't even get me fucking started on the lore. Jesus Christ. But before we move on, I want to do a little mini review of it, because I actually think there's a lot of neat stuff about this game. So get ready to lose whatever lasting respect you had for me. Five Nights at Freddy's is a good game with a lot to like about it. I will die on that hill. I think people look back on this game negatively due to the greater Five Nights at Freddy's series, but when this game came out, it was super cool. It pretty much dropped out of nowhere and immediately spawned this internet-wide investigation as to how the game works, the lore, the secrets of the game, etc. And in my opinion, what Five Nights at Freddy's does right is the atmosphere and how subtle it is about telling you anything about it. It's a game that really benefits from playing with headphones because you routinely hear sounds of laughter, ambient noises like things falling over, and sounds that resemble something crawling through the vents. Say what you will about Scott Cawthon, but he did a pretty good job building a scary experience, especially since this was his first horror game, and he wasn't even really a fan of horror games before. There are certainly things not to like. The game relies way too heavily on jump scares, and a lot of the logistical stuff just doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, the doors just straight up, that doesn't make any, they require power to close? How does that even work? But all that said, it's a spooky game with a cool idea. And then all hell broke loose. Now, I'm assuming a lot of you already know this, but when Five Nights at Freddy's came out, it took the world by storm. People seriously went fucking bananas over this stupid little indie horror game. It was on the level of Undertale, Fortnite, Minecraft. It was nuts. And bananas and nuts, all you need now is ice cream, and you'll have a banana split. What the fuck am I talking about? And the first step toward total world domination was, of course, a sequel. Five Nights at Freddy's 2, Six Nights. I'm just kidding. It's not actually called that. Should have been, though. 252 Freddy was released on November 11th, 2014, an astounding 95 days after the first game was released. For those of you counting at home, that means that Scott spent an absolute maximum of 8 weeks developing an entire video game by himself, which is insane. But anyway, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is actually a prequel to the first game. It takes place in 1987. Now, those of you who are familiar with the lore of the games will probably know that 1987 is important to the story because of an event called the Bite of 87, in which a small child had their frontal lobe bitten off by one of the animatronics. But anyway, the plot is a whole different can of worms, so let's just talk about the game. Believe it or not, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is quite a lot more elaborate than the first game and has a lot more animatronics, so why don't we just start there? First off, the original 3, so to speak, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, have new designs that are generally referred to as the toy animatronics, i.e. Toy Freddy, Toy Chica, and Toy Bonnie. I personally find these designs a lot more visually appealing. I think the characters are a lot more distinct from one another. Freddy's all chubby. I love it. That said, I'm not huge on Chica's new design. I certainly hope no one was asking for the homicidal chicken animatronic to be sexier. Like, I mean, what better word is there to describe this? Next up, you got Mangle, a f***ed up redesign of Foxy, who was originally made cuter due to complaints of the first Foxy being too scary. The reason Mangle is all, well, mangled is because kids would take him apart all the time, necessitating the staff to reassemble him. But eventually they just got tired of putting him back together, so they just left him and let the kids take him apart as an attraction. You know, I was gonna make a joke about how stupid that is, but that sounds pretty fun. I would do that. Next up, you got Balloon Boy, who is actually based off of me as a kid. Balloon Boy is the only animatronic that doesn't actually try to kill the player, but rather assists the other animatronics in getting to you by doing stuff like disabling your flashlight and air vent lights. Next up is the Puppet, who will kill you if you don't routinely check the camera in the party corner to wind up the music box. Finally, you got what the game calls the Withered animatronics, which are old animatronics, but they're all decrepit and falling apart. According to the phone guy, they're still in the restaurant because the employees recycle their parts for new animatronics. Now, they may be falling apart, but don't be mistaken. They're still haunted. And then there's also the, I guess you could call them secret animatronics. There's Shadow Freddy, a girl version of Balloon Boy, Golden Freddy, who was actually in the first game, and, like, what do you want me to do with that? They rarely show up and serve as sort of Easter eggs. So yeah, the total animatronic count, excluding the Easter egg characters, is 10. 10 animatronics. Man, I didn't realize that this game was called Five Nights at Freddy's Too Many Cooks. So with the cast out of the way, let's see what we're dealing with here. Here's your new office. It's equipped with a massive open door and 2 vents on either side equipped with lights. For some reason the vents aren't covered, which seems like a hazard even if this place wasn't full of murderous, haunted androids, but whatever. You might wonder why your office is so much more dangerous this time around, and I don't know. The phone guy doesn't even seem to know.
Something else worth mentioning is kind of the quartz modern design of the building. You may have noticed there are no doors for you to close.
Yeah, okay, modern. Is that your professional architectural opinion? Shut the f*** up. Luckily, this time you can't run out of power, although you do have a flashlight that can run out, though it lasts quite a lot longer than the power did in the last game. Since you can't close the door or the vents, Fazbear Entertainment has supplied you with a highly advanced method of self-defense, a Freddy mask that you can put on to trick the animatronics into thinking that you're not an endoskeleton, but in fact one of them. Now, you might look at all these different animatronics that all work differently and think that this game would be f***ing impossible. But that's not really the case. It's rather simple, actually. All you gotta do is check the cameras, keep track of where the toy animatronics are, wind the music box, make sure the Balloon Boy doesn't get into your office because he'll disable your lights and he won't leave. If you've got animatronics in your office, you gotta put on the mask and hope they go away, except of course for Foxy, the mask doesn't work on him, so you gotta flash your light at him. And you gotta be quick with the mask, especially with the old animatronics, because they just warp into your office with no warning and kill you if you so much as hesitated to put on the mask within 1 or 2 seconds. Yeah, so this game is, what words did you use? Fucking impossible? yeah, Freddy 2 is so much harder than Freddy 1. It's straight up ridiculous. There's just way too much shit going on, and there's way too many things to micromanage. And also, sometimes when you die, and also sometimes when you finish levels, I don't know if there's much of a logic to it. You get these Atari 2600 looking minigames that elaborate very vaguely on the Freddy lore. It's here that we see for the first time William Afton, perhaps more commonly known as the Purple Guy, who, spoiler, killed a bunch of kids and stuffed their bodies into suits, which is why they're all haunted. Good going, jackass. Overall, I don't know, Freddy 2 is pretty fucking stupid. Like I said last time, I have a hard time suspending my disbelief here. Like, the first game has its fair share of logistical issues, sure, but this is definitely pushing it. Like, what's the point of this door? Why would any establishment have a gigantic opening without a door on it? What purpose does this serve? Why don't the vents have covers? Don't all vents have covers? I don't think this is up to code. This whole letting kids take apart Foxy as an attraction thing, like, it's so unbelievable. It seems like such a hazard. There's gotta be sharp parts in there, right? I don't know, man. Let's just move on. I can't spend my whole life dwelling on Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I got plenty more suffering ahead of me. 2 down, lots and lots to go. Here's Five Nights at Freddy's 3, which was released March 2nd, 2015. Just under 4 months after the second game, so slightly longer than the gap between the first and second games, but still a shockingly short period of time to make a whole-ass new video game. This one takes place in the far-off, distant future, 2023. I don't really mind being uncool anymore, you know? Like, when kids use slang terms and I don't understand them, it's like a learning experience, you know? I'm not bothered at all by the fact that there are fully grown, functioning adults who are younger than the Game Boy Advance SP. So after years of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza somehow managing to stay in business, even though it's pretty much common knowledge that their animatronics are at best dangerous, at worst haunted, the company has decided to just say f*** it and go all in on the spooky stuff. This game has you working as, you guessed it, an overnight security guard, but this time at a haunted house style attraction called Fazbear's Fright. You start up the first night and are greeted by an all new character, Phone Dude. Not Phone Guy, Phone Dude.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time.
Wow. The Phone Dude sure sounds a lot like the Phone Guy, doesn't he? Anyone else notice that? So yeah, Scott Cawthon does his best Jeff Bridges impression and he expects us to believe that it's a totally new character. The worst part is that halfway through the phone call on the second night, Phone Dude here tells you that he found some, quote, vintage training tapes and he just fucks off for the rest of the game while pre-recorded phone calls from the original Phone Guy play. Scott, buddy, I get it, you've got kids and shit, and given how long it takes you to make entire video games, I imagine having a social life might not exactly be priority numero uno, but like you must know one other person who you could have gotten to be this character, right? Do you not even know one other adult male who you could have cast as the Phone Dude? It wouldn't be quite as bad if the Phone Dude stuck around for the entire game, but like when it switches over to good old Phony G, it makes it so obvious that it's the same guy doing a different voice. But anyway, enough complaining. God forbid I criticize someone for putting in the bare minimum, my bad. Freddy 3 is a little bit different from the other two, so let's get into it. Freddy 1 had 4 animatronics to worry about, and Freddy 2 saw you attempting to survive against half of the 2015 Memphis Grizzlies. See, I could have used any sports team there, but I chose the Memphis Grizzlies because their mascot is a bear, and Freddy is also a bear. See? Where else are you going to get sports humor and Five Nights at Freddy's analysis all in one place? Right? Nowhere. That's why you come to me. Freddy 3, unlike its predecessors, has a grand total of 1 animatronic that can kill you. This, my friends, is Springtrap, the reanimated corpse of William Afton, aka Purple Guy, trapped inside what the game calls a Springlock costume. Throughout the pre-recorded calls, Phone Guy describes the Springlock costumes as hybrid animatronics that were capable of switching between fully automated animatronics and wearable costumes. Unfortunately, the Springlock costumes have a teensy design flaw wherein they can switch back into animatronic mode and kill the person inside, which is what happened here. While generally not much different from the last 2 games, Freddy 3 has a few unique mechanics. You still look at security cameras, obviously, but now we've got a much more elaborate ventilation system that Scary Bunny Man can use to get you. To combat this, you can block off certain vents, but you can only have one blocked at a time, so you have to be strategic about it. Another tool you can use to combat Springtrap is this little play audio button, which plays a clip of Balloon Boy saying, "Hello? as he's been known to. If you're able to play the audio in the right room at the right time, you can actually distract Springtrap and deter him from getting to your office as quickly. The other main thing you have to keep an eye on is your maintenance panel on the left here. If the audio, cameras, or ventilation go out, you have to reboot them, and for some reason you can't look away from the screen while doing so. Wow, Five Nights at Freddy's ignoring logic to make a scenario more threatening? Just when you thought you'd seen it all. Now, while Springtrap is the only one who can actually kill you, he's not the only threat in this game. Hallucinations of the other animatronics can appear and jump scare you, messing up stuff in your maintenance panel. And that's Freddy 3, essentially, another game about looking at cameras. Just like last time, I think this one is my favorite so far, at least in terms of gameplay and atmosphere. It's tough to beat the first one. In a vacuum, I'd say that one is the most creative and immersive one, but I think 3 has a lot more to like about it than 2. For one thing, it's just straight up scary. It's neat that they went for a different tone with the haunted house style attraction thing. Plus, only having one genuine threat in the form of Springtrap makes them seem a lot more scary. Like, obviously you're at a disadvantage in the second game. It's 1 against 10. What did you expect? This game also feels a lot more alive than the first 2. There's just a lot more animation here. Springtrap runs past you when he gets into your office. Phantom Freddy limps by your window. It's unfortunate that the bar is so low for these games that moving character models is a genuine point of praise, but hey, that's the world we're living in. Next up is, get ready for it, Five Nights at Freddy's 4. You see, they call it that because it's the 4th game in the Five Nights at Freddy's series. This one was released July 23rd, 2015, just under 5 months after the last game. By the grace of God, Scott Cawthon showed a little bit of restraint and took a year between this one and the next game. But the release of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 meant that by the series' first birthday, Five Nights at Freddy's had 4 installments. To put that into perspective, Final Fantasy took 4 years to make as many games, Zelda took 7 years, and Metal Gear Solid took 10 years. And all those games were made by big development teams with a bunch of people. These games were made by one guy. He had to have just been in his house all day programming video games, right? Like, how do you even have time to see your family with an output rate like that? Five Nights at Freddy's 4 takes place... from what I can tell, it takes place in 1983, making it chronologically the first in the series. Although gameplay-wise, it's pretty much exactly the same, it's thematically quite a lot different from the first 3 games, so let's get into it. For the first time in Freddy history, this game doesn't see you take control of a security guard in a pizzeria/arcade, but rather as a little boy in his bedroom at night. You learn through the little in-between minigame cutscene type things that our protagonist is a little boy who was severely injured by one of the animatronics at the original Fredbear's Family Diner. Also, I didn't mention this, but this is Fredbear. He was the original mascot of the first restaurant. And as a result of his traumatic birthday party, he experiences nightmares wherein many horrifying Freddys and Bonnies and Chicas are coming to kill his little bitch ass. So here's your bedroom. You have 2 open doors on either side and a closet that you have to check. You also have to routinely turn around and check your bed to prevent these little Freddys from accumulating and killing you. One thing that's super awesome, and when I say super awesome, I mean really fucking annoying, is the fact that this game relies heavily on sound cues. You have to run up to the door and listen for breathing. If you hear breathing, you have to hold the door shut until whatever eldritch horror awaits you outside leaves. If you don't hear breathing, you have to flash your light, which prevents something. I don't know. I assume it makes the animatronics go away. Five Nights at Freddy's isn't very good at telling you how everything works. Also, in between each night, you have to play this mini game called Fun with Plush Trap, where you have a minute and a half to stop a stuffed Springtrap right on the X on the floor. And if you succeed, you get to skip the first 2 hours of the next night. You know that the game's really good when the reward for completing a mini game is not having to play as much of the game. So now that you got the rundown, let's meet the cast. Technically, this game doesn't introduce any new characters since they're just nightmare forms of the old animatronics, but they are quite visually distinct, so let's take a look, shall we? Nightmare Freddy, who looks just like classic Freddy, but he has little Freddys all over his body. Nightmare Chica, Bonnie, and Foxy are basically the same as they appeared in the first game, although a lot more tattered and with a lot more teeth. And then you got Nightmare Fredbear, I believe technically making his first appearance as an actual animatronic that you have to keep track of. In the other games, he only appeared as Easter eggs or in cutscenes. And finally, you got Nightmare, a black Freddy who only appears in Night 7 and is essentially a final boss. You know, in my first video, I was rather harsh on this one, and trust me, it has its fair share of stupid shit. Like, the whole focus on audio cues is so obviously just a ploy to make the player more susceptible to jump scares. And I know, this is Five Nights at Freddy's we're talking about, jump scares are kind of the game's whole shtick, but like, come on man, after 4 games, don't you think you could have maybe tried to make the game scary without hinging entirely on jump scares? But that said, I think Freddy 4 has a lot of cool stuff about it thematically. Like, for one thing, the suspension of disbelief is a lot smaller of an issue this time around because the game takes place entirely in a nightmare. I'm no Freddy lore specialist, specialist, but I believe that the canon is that this kid is actually recovering in a hospital and dreaming about his bedroom. The game actually hints at this by occasionally putting a pill bottle or an IV drip thing next to the kid's bed. If this were supposed to be actually happening, I wouldn't be able to help myself from saying, why not just close the doors? But this is a dream. Dreams don't make sense. I once had a dream where I did well on a university exam. Can you imagine? I think this game taking place in a nightmare also allowed the animatronics to be a lot more visually interesting than before. I really like the animatronics' teeth. They have several rows and sharp fangs, which is extra cool when you remember that the kid was bitten by one of them. Fredbear's most distinct feature are his giant razor-sharp fangs, even more so than the other animatronics. All things considered, this one's pretty neat, at least visually and thematically. The gameplay is nothing to write home about, and the jump scares are annoying, but it could have very easily just been Overnight Security Guard Simulator Volume 4. Well, folks, there you go. The original Five Nights at Freddy's quadrilogy. And, unfortunately, we're just about halfway done. But we're now getting into the portion of the Five Nights at Freddy's series that I'm actually not familiar with. I kinda lost interest after the first 4. So let's get right into it. Five Nights at Freddy's 5. And 6. And 7. And 8. Hey everyone, during my month of suffering through every single goddamn fucking godforsaken Five Nights at Freddy's game, I also watched Willy's Wonderland, and I felt almost obligated to do a little mini review of it in this episode, so here we go. For those of you who are unaware, Willy's Wonderland is a low-budget movie about a Chuck E. Cheese-style hot dog restaurant where all the animatronics come to life and kill people. What a concept, right? This time, however, they're possessed by serial killers rather than victims of serial killers. The authorities in the surrounding town made a deal with the animatronics to feed them victims in exchange for the animatronics not killing everyone in the town. It unbelievably stars Oscar award-winning actor Nicolas Cage, who plays a totally silent dude who falls into the trap, but rather than being eaten, one by one kills every animatronic in hand-to-hand combat. This is, bar none, without a shadow of a Freddy, one of the most off-the-rails, bananas movies I have ever seen in my entire life. I went in thinking it was gonna be nuts, but it blew my expectations into fucking orbit, man. Nicolas Cage literally does not talk in this movie. Not a single word exits his mouth. And also he's got this thing where like he can't fight the animatronics unless he goes and cracks open a can of whatever this purple pop is and plays pinball. He has to do both of those things in order to fight. He's like Popeye with spinach, only way more elaborate and inconvenient. And like they never explain it. Like I said, Nicolas Cage doesn't talk, so we're just totally left in the dark about it. I did like the look of the animatronics. It gave it a bit of a fun 80s horror movie vibe. But like honestly, I can't believe some sort of lawsuit hasn't happened as a result of this movie. It's literally the exact plot of Five Nights at Freddy's, only somehow significantly more stupid. Maybe Scott Cawthon didn't think it was worth it to sue the people who made this movie, given the, you know. But yeah, those are my thoughts in a nutshell. I'll almost definitely do an episode about it in the future, so mark your calendars for the future. Intermission over. During the releases of the first 4 Freddy games, the general perception of the series went from neat little indie horror game to, alright, the series was getting stale, you know? Ironically, Five Nights at Freddy's was getting old to a lot of people, despite the fact that by the release of the 4th game, the series was not quite a year old. Now, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was supposed to be the final chapter, although anyone who's a fan of horror movies will know it's never the final chapter. However, after Freddy 4, it did kind of seem like Scotty was going to take the series in a new direction when he announced Five Nights at Freddy's World, a cartoony turn-based JRPG featuring the cast of Five Nights at Freddy's. It was a disaster, a colossal failure, but that's a story for another time. But that one's not canon, so I don't have to talk about it. The actual next installment in the Freddy series was Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, the first game in the series that wasn't made entirely by one person. He also had a composer this time. What the fuck, man? What kind of work ethic does this guy... Did God bless him because of all those Christian games he made? I don't understand. Freddy 5 was released October 7th, 2016, which might make you think, wow, he actually took over a full year to make this one. But keep in mind, he also made FNAF World during this time, so... We play as Michael Afton, the son of William Afton, who has taken a job as a maintenance guy at Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental, an underground facility, and... sister location to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Unlike Freddy Fazbear's Child Casino, Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental is a company that rents animatronics for children's birthday parties. After the creepy opening cutscene that you can't skip or even alt-tab out of it because it locks your mouse in place, we start at an elevator and are greeted by a robotic voice explaining what's going on. I think this is the first time that the series has really managed to flex its comedy muscles. Previous titles had the occasional joke, but this entire opening sequence is very silly. I really like the style of comedy used here. A lot of the time comedy is used in horror to set the viewer or player at ease, but in this circumstance it actually elevates the horror by making it clear that this guy is not going to help you. If anything, he's going to make everything worse. After climbing through a vent, we end up in the main office where we can see animatronics on both sides.
Press the red button now to administer a controlled shock. Maybe that will put the spring back in her step.
I would prefer not to. I thank my Google Assistant every time she gives me directions somewhere. You shouldn't be pissing off robots. So you might think that this game is exactly the same as the other ones, sitting in an office and turning on lights and trying not to be killed, but it's actually quite a lot more elaborate than that. But before we get into that, let's take attendance, shall we? We got a lot more animatronics, folks. First off is Circus Baby, the namesake of the restaurant, who seems like a good guy because she gives you tips on how to survive through the night, but trust me, she's not. She's mean. Next up is Ballora, a ballerina. There's not much more to her than that. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy are, of course, redesigns of the old Freddy gang. Freddy has a little bow tie and a hand puppet, which is, you guessed it, independently self-aware, and Foxy looks rather familiar. Then you got Enard, who only shows up in Night 5 and is actually all the different animatronics combined by Circus Baby in an attempt to escape the facility. Sister Location actually works quite a lot different from the previous games. Rather than just sitting and trying to survive, each night provides you with a different task to complete. During Night 2, the power goes out, necessitating you to sneak past Ballora for like 2 fucking years to get to the room with the breaker panel where, for some reason, Freddy lives. This part fucking sucks. You have to slowly restore power to the entire facility while also stopping to distract Freddy from killing you. And, if you lose, you gotta sneak through Ballora's room again. Yes! Night 3, you gotta take apart and provide maintenance for the animatronics and so on and so forth. While I will give Scott credit for trying something different, I don't like this game very much, I'm not gonna lie. It's just not that fun. Like, I mean, the gameplay in the other games were literally just clicking, but like, at least you knew what you were doing, you know? Sister Location is essentially just different point-and-click minigames, and if you fail, which you probably will, it sends you so far back. Like, if I was just dealing with Freddy here, it wouldn't be that big a deal, but if he kills you, you gotta go back and sneak past Ballora again, which is just... ugh. I hate this. This door is not that far away. Why is it taking me so long to get there? I don't know, man. In concept, it's cool, and I'm sure a lot of people really like this one, but I'm just not a fan, I'm sorry. At least in the old games, when you die, it's like, fuck, well, back to 12 a.m. again. Whereas in this game, it's like, fuck, I have to sneak past Ballora again? God fucking damn, how was I supposed to know what to do? Like, take the other Freddy games. In the first night, you're generally good. It gives you the opportunity to learn how everything works. But in this game, it's like, press this very small button. If you misclick by a quarter inch, you're f***ed. Go back to the beginning of the night and suffer through the boring part where you gotta sneak past Foxy. Like, you're begging me to just watch Markiplier play it. At least then I'll get to see his handsome face in the corner of my screen. The next game in our suffering marathon is 2017's Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. Let's hop right in. Okay, thankfully, this is not the whole game. There's more to it than this. Eventually, this little minigame glitches out and gets corrupted, and we transition into a dark room with a really fucked up looking Circus Baby animatronic. The tape recorder here suggests that this is some sort of testing room to see if the animatronics respond to certain sounds. It seems weird, but it's actually a little tutorial for stuff that happens later in the game, so good job, Five Nights at Freddy's. We next get a cutscene of a 50s style training tape where it's implied that we are the new owner of a Fazbear Entertainment Pizzeria franchise. And finally, we get into the meat of the game, and yeah, it's like an actual simulation game where you have to manage a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza restaurant. You buy arcade games and attractions, animatronics, and you can even playtest the games you buy, and each one is a completely unique minigame, which is fun. One detail I really like is that certain minigames are accompanied by a slowed down, more chill version of the music Freddy plays in the first game when he's about to kill you. Once you finish buying stuff and upgrading your restaurant, the second phase of the game begins, which is a lot more Five Nights at Freddy's-esque. You have to sit in this cramped room with vents on either side and complete a list of tasks while trying to avoid getting killed by the animatronics. It's a very simplified version of the Freddy formula, but it works given how much more this game has to offer. Once that is over, you once again do this interrogation room animatronic salvaging thing where you have to get through all the audio cues without getting jump scared. If you manage to salvage an animatronic, they'll start trying to kill you during this part, you know what I'm talking about. Honestly, I gotta be honest, I think this is the best game in the series, at least so far. There's just so much more to it than the other Freddy games. The simulation part is actually quite a lot of fun. I love that every attraction you buy has a little minigame you can play. I love this little guy. I know that his source material is pretty terrifying, but look at him go. I could watch that guy dance all day long. Apparently I'm not alone. Everybody on the internet seems to be huge fans of this little guy. His name is Helpy, by the way, and I cannot blame them. The whole salvaging animatronics thing is kind of whatever. It's a lot of waiting without much challenge to it at all. And I'm kind of 50-50 on the whole security guard part. You're basically just clicking on one of these and then you wait for it to finish. Plus, I think it would have been cooler if the animatronics that you buy during the simulation portion were the ones coming to kill you. That seems like an obvious missed opportunity. But it's still neat, you know? It reminds me of a simpler time of Five Nights at Freddy's before the entire series became multitasking with Jump Scare Simulator 2014. But don't worry, folks, I'm not going soft on you. Lock your doors, Cawthon, because I'm about to criticize your video game. This might be a little bit of a nitpick, but I feel the need to point it out. Scott, buddy, what is your obsession with the shift key, man? Why you always gotta be making me rapid press the shift key? So at the beginning of the game, you gotta shoot pizzas at a bunch of kids, and the key you press to do this is the shift key, much like in Sister Location, where the jump button during the Little Circus Baby platforming segments was also shift. Fun fact about Windows computers, if you press shift 5 times in rapid succession, a window pops up asking you if you want to turn on sticky keys, and it usually alt-tabs you out of the game. Now you might say, oh Ben, just disable that feature, but that's not the point. What if you weren't that computer savvy, or were, I don't know, a kid, and this kept impeding your ability to play the game? Like, all I'm saying is, like, why didn't you just, it could have been the space bar, man, or like, I don't know, any other key? I'm sorry, I know that kind of came out of nowhere, but I had to say something, man. He can't keep getting away with this. Five Nights at Freddy's 7, the next mainline installment in the Freddy series is Ultimate Custom Night, and by mainline installment, I mean Wikipedia has it bolded on the Five Nights at Freddy's article, so I don't know. Ultimate Custom Night was developed by, you guessed it, Scott Cawthon. Unlike all the other games we've looked at, Ultimate Custom Night doesn't really contribute much to the overarching story of the series, or at least I don't think it does. Fuck's sake. Okay, my mistake. Apparently you play as William Afton, aka Purple Guy, post-mortem, being haunted in the afterlife by the millions of evil animatronics he's responsible for creating. As the title suggests, this is the most customizable game in the series thus far. You have a total of 50 animatronics that you can set to have an aggression level between 0 and 20. I haven't really talked about this so far, but this has been a feature in pretty much every game in the series. Once you beat the main game, you get a custom night mode where you can choose how aggressive the animatronics are. This is essentially a sandbox mode of that, and each animatronic functions differently and requires different actions be taken. I don't know how or where to say this, but this game is kind of like the Mortal Kombat trilogy of the Five Nights at Freddy's series. You know, the gang's all here. So let's get right into it, huh? Oh, that's all, huh? Easy peasy. What the fuck is this? You're just gonna throw the most elaborate control screen of all time at me and just be like, good luck. Is this game really that complicated that it requires half of my entire keyboard? Isn't this Five Nights at Freddy's? I don't know, man. In theory, I could see this being fun. It's just an insane balls-out version of Five Nights at Freddy's where you can totally customize the experience. But, like, there's just too much going on. The appeal of Five Nights at Freddy's, in my view, has always kind of been, like, simple controls, difficult challenge. But this is just ridiculous. Like, how are you supposed to absorb all this and actually know what you're doing? With all that said, let's do 50-20 mode where all the animatronics are at max aggression and see what happens. Well, I'm proud of my performance, all things considered. Alright, folks, we have finally reached the final game in this ridiculous excursion. Prepare yourself, because we are about to enter the mouth of the beast. This next game may be rather new, but it has a legacy unlike any other game in this series. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach is the 9th main installment in the Freddy series. A sequel to Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, the VR one I can't afford, Security Breach was developed by Steel Wool Studios and published by Scott Games. I would wager to say that it will be the last game published by Scott Games, since Scott Cawthon was, as the kids say, cancelled due to his voting history becoming public knowledge. I'm not going to get any further into that because frankly it's just no fun at all. Google it if you're really interested. It's not my job to teach you about everything in the world. Side note, this is a little warning. This is a fun episode, okay? So if I see anybody in that comments section engaging in some sort of political fight, I'm gonna come in there and I'm gonna hit you with my ring hand, which is both of my hands. Security Breach takes place at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, a giant shopping mall themed around all new versions of everybody's favorite animatronic gang. This time around we got Roxanne Wolf, Montgomery Gator, Glamrock Chica, and Glamrock Freddy. At the beginning of the game we get a cutscene where Freddy malfunctions and falls over on the stage. We then find ourselves seeing from Freddy's perspective when a little boy says that he somehow ran inside Freddy's stomach hatch while he was on stage. Said little boy is Gregory, the prepubescent protagonist of the game who has found himself inside the Pizzaplex after hours, being pursued by a security guard, Vanessa. Freggy agrees to help Gregory escape from the neon hellscape he finds himself in. Eventually we find out that Vanessa is not your average security guard, but in fact, believe it or not, an evil rabbit animatronic named Vanny. Vanny and/or Vanessa programmed all the animatronics to be hostile and try to kill Gregory, so we gotta get the fuck out of here. And that's the storyline in a nutshell. Little boy runs away from evil security guard. Oh, how the tables have turned, huh? So now let's take a look at the gameplay, because it's actually quite a lot different from the other games. And in the spirit of Halloween, I will now vanish into thin air! Why does nothing ever happen when I want it to? So as I'm sure you can tell, Security Breach is quite a lot different from the other Freddy games. Rather than a point-and-click survival game, Security Breach is a first-person survival horror stealth game. The entire game takes place inside the massive Freddy Fazbear's Pizzaplex Mall, which Gregory, with help from Freddy, must sneak around to find security clearance cards to get through. There are essentially two playable characters in this game, Gregory and Freddy. As long as Freddy is fully charged, Gregory can hop inside Freddy and gain a bit of immunity from the animatronics. Ain't nobody touching Freddy goddamn Fazbear, you'd all be nothing without the star of the show. When you're not inside Freddy, however, you have to play as Gregory, a little bitch-ass kid who has basically no method of defense against the animatronics, at least not early on. Eventually you get a gun that temporarily disables the animatronics and a camera that stuns them, but for the most part you're on your own. As a whole, the game is essentially a stealth adventure game. Each area is patrolled by Chica, Monty, Roxy, or Vanny, or a combination of those four, and obviously the goal is to make it through the area without getting caught. In addition to the main animatronics, the mall is also patrolled by cleaning robots and security robots. If you get caught by these guys, they won't kill you, but they will alert the animatronics to your position. Thankfully, these guys basically have to bump into you to catch you, so you can use that to your advantage. Even if you run straight past them, they won't catch you. The cool thing about it, in my opinion, is that it essentially adds an extra element of difficulty. If you're in a section of the game where you're being chased by one animatronic and you get caught by one of the staff robots, another animatronic will get thrown into the mix, adding a little bit more of a challenge. At the beginning of the game, Freddy gives Gregory a Faz Watch, which he can use to check the progress of missions, read messages he finds that give him hints, and look at a map. The other thing you can do on the Faz Watch is access the facility's security cameras, which shows you a real-time perspective of what's going on. You can think of this as similar to the little mini-map in Metal Gear Solid, which shows you the enemy's scope of view. I think thematically this is super cool. Considering every Freddy game has had security cameras as like a core mechanic, I really like that this game found a way to implement it here. Honestly though, there's not a whole lot more to this game than that in terms of gameplay. It's basically stealth segments followed by some other segment where you do something like play laser tag or figure a way out of a maze or whatever. Now you folks know me, I'm the positivity guy. I like to end on a high note, but this is Halloween, a scary time of year where nothing makes sense. So this time, I'm gonna be doing it the other way around! Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach was met with relatively mixed to negative reception when it came out. People found it frustrating and buggy. Many a video can be found online of the animatronics glitching out and trying to get through walls and stuff. So obviously I went in under the impression that this game is a complete joke, but I can honestly say that I was pleasantly surprised by a lot of aspects. Security Breach actually has a lot to love about it in my opinion. The stealth game is nothing groundbreaking, but it's fun, and the security camera mechanic is actually one of the best I've ever seen in a stealth game. The cameras allow you to get an idea of where every enemy is relative to you while still making sense in the context of the game. Say what you will about this game, but the usage of security cameras is pretty creative. They could have easily just not had any reference to security cameras at all, but they found a way to implement it, which I think is pretty cool. Now, the gameplay is its own entire thing that I'll get into when I'm in negative mode, but I like to give credit where credit is due, and Security Breach really shines in the visuals and atmosphere. This game is, by far in my opinion, the most charming, visually interesting game in the entire series. The Mega Pizzaplex feels real. It feels like a place I would really want to go if it wasn't, you know, extremely haunted. Everything has this 80s arcade vibe to it. It's very bright and colorful, and yet also contrasts to the dark and creepy parts. The design of the animatronics is great. Visually, they're very cool, and each one has a much more distinct personality than ever before on a Freddy game. Monty Gator has a southern accent, and he's kind of the bonehead of the group. Roxy is totally self-obsessed and narcissistic. Chica eats garbage for some reason. I also love that the Pizzaplex is filled with Easter eggs and references to the other games. And when I say filled, I mean filled. There are references to the old games, characters making background appearances, dialogue that subtly refers to certain characters. There's even a note that you can find that makes reference to an actual real-life conspiracy theory that asserts that Chuck E. Cheese recycles their pizza, which is hilarious. What a dig, man. Way to come out on top. Some of this shit is well hidden, too. Like, you can get into the Sun Animatronics balcony room, but you have to take pictures of a bunch of animatronics to reveal a secret door behind a movie poster. Like, who would think to do that? It's genuinely on the level of the secret Ratman room in the first Portal game. So all that's well and good, you know, Security Breach is fun, it's got a cool atmosphere, and it's got lots of fun references. Kumbaya, we're all getting along, God bless. But now's the part you've all been waiting for. It's time to be mean. So, like I said, a lot of people's issue with this game was how glitchy and frustrating it was when it came out. Now, I never personally found this game to be terribly buggy. Occasionally the animatronics will get stuck, but not frequently enough to be an issue. I only really saw it once or twice, and I mean, no video game is without any bugs whatsoever. However, it should be noted that I played this game in October of 2022, 8 months after February, when a big patch was released that fixed a lot of the bugs, made quality of life improvements, and fixed the difficulty a little bit. That said, this game still has a lot of issues. Sure, it functions better than it used to, but you can only do so much to fix a fundamentally flawed game. Security Breach is one of those games that will frustrate you to the point of fantasizing about strangling a stranger on the bus. You guys can relate to that, right? That's not something it's not exclusive to me, right? Like I said, I actually had a lot of fun with the stealth segments. I like the use of these security robots that you can totally avoid if you can manage to run past them in the right way. It prevents you from spending the entire game hiding and waiting for an opening, and it also makes the animatronics more scary to have these guys here because they are significantly less of a threat while still being a threat. I think the major issue with this game is how unforgiving it is, and this really comes down to the save points. Rather than having a feature where you can save whenever you want, Security Breach has save stations. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. I like that the save points are little kiosks where customers can reserve a spot in line. And they have my favorite character, Helpy, and I love Helpy. But that's my limit of nice things to say about the save stations. Now, save points in video games are a topic for another time. I think they have their place for sure, but I really think that this game should have either been made more charitable with them or just given you the ability to save whenever. So much of this game is spent replaying sections that you've already done over and over and over and fucking over, because the game gives you a save point and then throws you into an insane gauntlet of animatronics and security robots, and if you make one wrong step and get caught, it kicks you all the fucking way back to the save point. Like, take this part for example. I am expected to sneak past Roxy, who can see and hear me, while also avoiding these security robots that are alternating a figure 8 at fucking Mach speed. If she catches you, which trust me, she will, it kicks you all the way back to the beginning, so you gotta sneak past Monty Gator again, which is like, it's not that hard, but like, fuck you, man. I don't want to do that all over again. And yeah, there's a save point midway through, sure, but watch this. Here I am loading the save point. Like, come on, man. I really don't think it would be overly forgiving to put some checkpoints in here to make the segment more fun. The absolute worst culprit of this is the fucking daycare. Christ almighty. So early on, Gregory finds himself in a daycare where he meets this crazy sun/moon guy who is pretty insane to begin with, but he becomes more insane when the lights go out. For some reason, Gregory somehow turns out the lights, turning Buddy into evil mode. So you have to climb around these play structures, which for some reason have power generators hidden in them. Your guess is as good as mine. And turn all 5 of them on. Now thankfully the big patch they released color-coded the cables, before they were all gray. But let me tell you, that does not make this a whole lot easier. These fucking play structures are so goddamn confusing. Everything looks the same, so you find yourself walking around in circles having no idea if you've made any progress. And if Poppy Playtime over here catches you, you are forced all the way back to the start and you have to do it all over again. And worst of all, you can't even save as you go because the save point becomes disabled as soon as you start the mission. That's the most infuriating thing about this game. Sneaking around and stuff is fun, but on your 7th attempt, you just want to say f*** it and give up. Literally all they would have to do is implement some sort of checkpoint mechanic so you don't lose so much progress every time you get spotted across the room and die. Or, you know, if you get spotted behind a window and Chica just teleports behind you. The other thing I really don't like about this game is the artificial horror it uses. Now some of you might be saying, Ben, what the f*** are you talking about? What on earth is artificial horror? Well, maybe you shouldn't interrupt me and I would be able to explain. When I say artificial horror, essentially what I mean is a game adding some sort of stupid mechanic that adds tension but doesn't really make any sense in the context of the game. Security Breach does this by making you hold down E at a save point. This is purely designed to make it seem scary, but it only makes sense in the context of a video game. Like, why do I have to hold down E? It's just adding difficulty for the sake of adding difficulty. To better illustrate my point, take the ink ribbons in Resident Evil. It makes the game harder and scarier because you can't save as many times as you want, but it also makes sense because you save at a typewriter. And for that matter, here's an example that's actually from Security Breach. There are items hidden throughout the game, and they're always in Jack-in-the-Boxes. So you have to hold down E to open the Jack-in-the-Box, but it makes sense because you gotta wind it up. Like, I mean, I don't know if it would necessarily be better if there was like a loading screen or you had to wait for a ticket to pop out or something, but at least it wouldn't feel so fake, you know? It's not as big an issue as the whole unforgiving thing, but it's just lazy game design. It's fake tension that doesn't make any sense. Overall, I don't know how I feel about Security Breach. In concept, it's so cool. The level design is top-notch, and it's cool to finally see some sort of evolution in the gameplay from just, you know, this. But there are just so many long, annoying segments in between the fun stuff, and the game is so needlessly unforgiving. Nobody wants to redo the same segment of a game over and over, especially in a game where you have to sneak around and hide and wait for long periods of time. I don't know, man. Like, I want to like this game, but it's certainly not making it easy on me. Oh my god. That's it. That's all of them. I don't even feel relieved. I feel empty. But before I go, I think I should wrap everything up nicely, because I am now a lot more knowledgeable on Five Nights at Freddy's than I ever would have hoped to be. So may as well just put it to good use, right? Five Nights at Freddy's is such a crazy phenomenon in the grander world of video games as a whole. When the first game came out, it changed everything, which may seem dramatic, but it's true. Say what you will about Five Nights at Freddy's, but it undoubtedly had a huge impact on indie survival horror games. And I can't even begin to get across the cultural impact this game had. Within the first year of this game's release, Five Nights at Freddy's had become a global phenomenon. Each and every game that came out was torn apart and examined and analyzed. Everyone wanted to figure out the secrets hidden in this haunted pizzeria. Now, here we are 8 years later, and Five Nights at Freddy's certainly doesn't have the same impact it once had. But it's crazy that the series is still going, man, seemingly without an end in sight. Of course, the lore and the legacy aren't the only things that matter, so we're left asking one question. Are these games good? I mean, I don't know. The first one is cool, the second one is stupid, the third one is less stupid than the second one, but still pretty stupid. The fourth one is neat, but not very fun to play. Sister Location can go f*** itself, I don't care what anyone says. Pizzeria Simulator is a fun and neat idea, and I could see how someone can enjoy Ultimate Custom Night, but it's still needlessly complicated. And Security Breach almost got so much right, but it still fails in a lot of ways, which sucks because it has a lot of fun stuff going on. Overall, if I had to sum up the entire series in one phrase, I would say cool idea, bad execution. And by execution, I'm not referring to anything to do with being stuffed into a springlock suit. Well, folks, we have finally reached the end of this year's Halloween Pizza and Murder special. I hope you all had as much fun as I didn't. If I am forced to see Markiplier's face one more time... No, I can't even jokingly say anything bad about that guy. He seems so nice, you know? So with all that done, I wish you all the spookiest of Halloweens. And remember to check under your beds and in your closets at night, because there might be a home invader who might steal your stuff. That's not funny. That's not... I shouldn't joke about home invasions. It's not fun scary. That's just, like, actually scary.